Good afternoon, and thank you very much for coming today. Early on January 8, 2020, Ukrainian International Airlines Flight 752 crashed shortly after taking off from the international airport in Tehran, taking the lives of all 176 people on board. For their families and loved ones, the world changed overnight. And then, over the weekend, their world changed again when the government of the Islamic Republic of Iran acknowledged that its own military was responsible for accidentally firing missiles and downing the aircraft. The Transportation Safety Board of Canada, the TSB, extends its deepest condolences to the families and loved ones of the people who perished in this tragedy. We have been in direct contact with the Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau, or AAIB, of the Islamic Republic of Iran since shortly after we learned of the accident. As announced last Thursday, and given the high number of Canadian fatalities, we have confirmed our role as an expert and accepted Iran's invitation to attend the accident site as entitled in Annex 13 to the Convention on International Civil Aviation. Two TSB air accident investigators left Canada on Friday evening and over the weekend met up with members of the Canadian consular team in Turkey. They have since obtained visas to travel to Iran and departed earlier today for Tehran, along with members of Canada's consular team. In addition, the TSB will also deploy a second team of investigators with expertise in aircraft recorder download and analysis once we confirm where and when this activity will take place. Now, this is not the first time that we've sent investigators overseas. The TSB is seen as a world leader, and we've participated in foreign investigations for close to 30 years. In this investigation, and I want to be clear about this, we do not yet fully know what the scope of our role will be. However, I also want to stress that so far, the Iranian AAIB has responded in compliance with international protocols. And furthermore, there have been early signs that Iran is allowing the TSB to play a more active role than normally permitted. For example, by inviting TSB investigators to participate in the download and analysis of the cockpit voice and flight data recorders. Again, whenever and wherever that takes place. Now, after every accident, there are many questions. Everyone wants to know what happened. Well, we know that. Everyone also wants to know how or why did this happen. And we have certainly heard the many questions being asked in the wake of this tragedy, and we have the same questions. It has already been reported that our role is quite limited by Annex 13 of the Convention on International Civil Aviation. As the state of occurrence, the Islamic Republic of Iran, and specifically its Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau, or AAIB, has the right to lead the investigation. The roles of other states with a special interest are also similarly prescribed. As the lead investigation agency, the Iranian AAIB is also responsible for communicating information about the progress and the results of the investigation, and we are bound to and will respect that. In this case, especially because 57 of the passengers on the aircraft were Canadian, it is our hope that the TSB will be allowed to bring more of its expertise to a thorough and transparent investigation. As an independent accident investigation agency, we will also collaborate with other international investigation authorities with whom we have long-standing and well-developed relationships, including those from France, Sweden, the United Kingdom, the United States, as well as Ukraine. The purpose of an Annex 13 safety investigation is to find all causal and contributing factors to an accident, without attributing blame or criminal or civil liability, to address safety deficiencies and to prevent similar accidents from happening again. And experience has shown that a thorough, safety-focused investigation offers the best chance of confirming what really happened and providing the answers that everyone is asking for, particularly for the families who lost so much. We all want answers, and sharing information is a cornerstone of trust. The world deserves to know how and why events unfolded as they did. We commit to providing the best expertise we can, but we must let the investigators do their work. We will only be able to release information specific to the progress and the results of the investigation to the extent determined by the Iranian AAIB. But I can assure you that we will continue to advocate for a full explanation of what happened and why, and we will speak up if we feel those answers aren't coming. Thank you.
Bonjour. Tôt le
Good
8 janvier
afternoon.
2020,
Early on
le vol
January 8,
752
2020,
Ukrainian International Airlines Flight 752
crashed shortly after taking off from the international airport in Tehran, taking the lives of all 176 people on board. For their families and loved ones, the world changed overnight, and then, over the weekend, their world changed again when the government of the Islamic Republic of Iran acknowledged that its own military was responsible for accidentally firing missiles and downing the aircraft. The Transportation Safety Board of Canada, TSB, extends its deepest condolences to the families and loved ones of the people who perished in this tragedy. We've been in direct contact with the Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau of the Islamic Republic of Iran since shortly after we learned of the accident. As announced last Thursday, and given the high number of Canadian fatalities, we've confirmed our role as an expert and accepted Iran's invitation to attend the accident site as entitled in Annex 13 to the Convention on International Civil Aviation. Two TSB air accident investigators left Canada on Friday evening and over the weekend met up with members of the Canadian consular team in Turkey. They've since obtained visas to travel to Iran and departed earlier today for Tehran, along with members of Canada's consular team. In addition, the Transportation Safety Board will deploy a second team of investigators with expertise in aircraft recorder download and analysis once we confirm where and when this activity will take place. This is not the first time we've sent our investigators overseas. The Transportation Safety Board is seen as a world leader, and we've participated in foreign investigations for almost 30 years. In this investigation, and I want to be clear about this, we do not yet fully know what the scope of our role will be. However, I want to stress that so far, the Iranian AAIB has responded in compliance with international protocols. Furthermore, there have been early signs that Iran is allowing the TSB to play a more active role than normally permitted. For example, by inviting TSB investigators to participate in the download and analysis of the cockpit voice and flight data recorders, again, whenever and wherever that takes place. After every accident, there are many questions. Everyone wants to know what happened. Well, we know that now. Everyone also wants to know how or why did it happen? And we've certainly heard the many questions being asked in the wake of this tragedy, and we have the same questions. It's already been reported that our role is quite limited by Annex 13 of the Convention on International Civil Aviation. As the state of occurrence, the Islamic Republic of Iran, and specifically its Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau, has the right to lead the safety investigation. The roles of other states with a special interest are also similarly prescribed. As the lead investigation agency, the Iranian AAIB is also responsible for communicating information about the progress and results of the investigation, and we are bound to and will respect that. In this case, especially because 57 of the passengers on the aircraft were Canadian, it's our hope that the TSB will be allowed to bring more of its expertise to a thorough and transparent investigation. As an independent accident investigation agency, we will also collaborate with other international investigation authorities with whom we have long-standing and well-developed relationships, including those from France, Sweden, the UK, and the US, as well as Ukraine. The purpose of an Annex 13 safety investigation is to find all causal and contributing factors to an accident without attributing blame or civil or criminal liability, to address safety deficiencies and prevent similar accidents from happening again. Experience has shown that a thorough, safety-focused investigation offers the best chance of confirming what really happened and providing the answers that everyone is asking for, particularly for the families who lost so much. We all want answers, and sharing information is a cornerstone of trust. The world deserves to know how and why events unfolded as they did. We commit to providing the best expertise we can, but we must let the investigators do their work. We will only be able to release information specific to the progress and results of the investigation to the extent determined by the Iranian AAIB. I can assure you, though, that we will continue to advocate for a full explanation of what happened and why, and we will speak up if we feel that answers are not forthcoming. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to start with Manon Cornier, Le Devoir, followed by Glenn McGregor, CTV News.
Good afternoon.
On sait que pourquoi l'avion est tombé. Vous le
Now we
dites.
know why the aircraft crashed.
1, 2, 3, 4. Vous m'entendez pas?
Perhaps you can speak up a little louder.
Ah bon, OK, excusez. On sait donc pourquoi il est tombé,
So
cet avion.
we know
Alors vous dites
why
que maintenant on va chercher
the
le comment
aircraft
et le
crashed,
pourquoi.
and now you're going to look for the how and the
Sur quel
why.
aspect vous avez vraiment autorité pour faire enquête, entre autres?
How
est-ce
far
que
does
c'est,
your authority
pourquoi on a
extend in
laissé
this
les vols
investigation?
civils,
Are you going to
décoller
look
ce
into
matin-là?
why a
Mais le vrai
civilian aircraft was
cafouillage, il est
allowed
arrivé au
to
niveau
take
des
off
militaires,
at that moment?
iraniens. Au Canada,
What
ça a déjà
about
pris
the
une commission
Iranian
d'enquête royale
military?
pour connaître le cafouillage de la
Do you
GRC dans le
think
cas d'Air India?
there should be a royal commission as there was after the Air India crash? What is the extent of your authority? What we are saying today is that Iran has the right under the Convention on International Civil Aviation to lead this investigation because Iran is the state of occurrence, the state where the crash happened. ICAO sets out the roles of other countries which have an interest in this occurrence. Annex 13 also prescribes how the investigation should unfold. And it also prescribes the format of the final report. Everyone must follow the guidelines in Annex 13 to the Convention. Everyone must follow these guidelines, including parties which have been invited to the investigation. As for the security aspect, investigators should put everything on the table. We know that an airliner was down. Was it intentional? This is a question which still needs to be answered. Other questions: why was the airspace opened? Why did aircraft keep on taking off? This is all part of the security investigation.
Est-ce que c'est intentionnel ou non? Est-ce que ça relève
to find
de
out
votre,
whether this was an
est-ce que c'est
intentional
votre
act or not. Is that part of your
Mais c'est la
jurisdiction?
juridiction en dessous de l'OACI.
Well, it is the jurisdiction which falls under the investigating country under ICAO, including partners involved in the investigation. Will we answer that question? That remains to be seen. It depends on how the investigation will unfold.
Similar question in English. There doesn't seem to be a whole lot of mystery why the plane came down now that the Iranians have admitted that there was a missile strike. What is it that Canadian investigators could possibly learn that we didn't really know of substance now about what really caused this, the systemic issues involving this missile being fired?
Okay, so basically, yes, we do know what has happened. What we don't know is why it happened, right? So the investigation is going to try to understand why it happened. And there's a number of things we need to look into. First of all, we need to kind of establish a sequence of events. So we need to understand how everything happened. We also have, questions on procedures, for example, being followed by the military, and that sort of stuff. So we'll have to look at that side. As well, why was the airspace not closed, considering, the tensions and what had happened just hours earlier? So we want to know why the Iranian Civilian Aviation Authority, why they haven't decided to close the airspace. And then also, even after the accident, why did some companies still operate out of that region? Airplanes flying out and out of that region. Those are all things we need to look into to understand and prevent.
But I just want to add one thing, and I want to be clear. This is not a TSB-led investigation. We are trying to be involved with the other countries, the U.S., the U.K., Sweden, France, the Ukraine, as to answer these questions. This is not a Canadian-led investigation. We do not have that authority, but we're trying to make sure that our role goes beyond what we're currently permitted under ICAO to be able to be part of the team of international countries working under the Iranian Accident Investigation Bureau to be able to answer those questions.
Okay, but given Canada's limited role as mandated by ICAO, do you think maybe an airplane accident investigation really isn't the right venue to get at the cause of this? Should there not be a broader investigation that looks at the actions of the Iranian military, if it was a military missile, and also the civil aviation authorities there as well? A broader investigation that goes beyond just looking at airplane wreckage and black boxes.
I want to draw a parallel here with what happened in Ukraine when Malaysia Airlines 17, Flight 17, was shot down. That happened in Ukrainian airspace. The wreckage ended up in Ukraine. The Ukrainians elected to delegate, as they're allowed to do under ICAO Annex 13, to the Dutch, the conduct of the investigation. The Dutch Safety Board, our equivalent, conducted a full and thorough investigation and concluded that that aircraft had been brought down by a missile shot from within Russia. They then went on to look at all of the other questions, the same questions that are being asked now. Why, given hostilities, were commercial airlines flying through and over Ukraine? Why wasn't the airspace? Why weren't there more restrictions in place? And they issued, in collaboration with other international partners, a very, very thorough, safety-focused investigation that, as a result, led to a number of changes under ICAO in airline standard operating procedures. So a safety investigation is absolutely the way to go. That doesn't preclude other investigations from taking place in parallel. For example, again referring back to MH17, in addition, the Dutch judiciary, under Dutch law, in fact, it's currently underway, are conducting a criminal investigation. And so the fact that we would like to do a full safety investigation doesn't preclude other types of investigations with other mandates from being conducted.
Okay, next we're going to go to Catherine Levesque, Presse Canadienne, followed by David Aiken at Global News.
Merci, je vais essayer de pas tousser. Juste quelques questions techniques.
I just have a couple of technical questions. You said that a TSB investigator has been sent to the crash site. When exactly will that be, and how many investigators would you like to see in total on the ground? I can answer that question. As it now stands, as there are two TSB investigators actually in the air right now, flying between Istanbul and Tehran. They should be landing within a few hours in Tehran. They already have a work plan in collaboration with the Iranian Investigation Bureau. And at that point, they will see what access Iran will give them. Further, as soon as we know where the flight data recorders will go to. So as soon as these flight data recorders, as soon as we know where they will be, we intend to send a second team with two other TSB investigators to that place. So the teams on the ground can continue their work at the crash site. So we'll have two teams of two. Again, we can't give you any details about the second team. We don't have those yet. Hasn't only one investigator been confirmed? No. The TSB is allowed to appoint an expert. So the TSB is taking on the role of an expert versus an accredited investigator. That's something different. Natasha can explain that. The expert can be more than one person. In fact, we have sent two of our investigators to the crash site. A further two will be sent as soon as we know where the black boxes will be analyzed.
C'était juste une précision. Une autre question. Comment qualifiez-vous l'attitude de l'Iran jusqu'à maintenant?
How would you describe Iran's attitude up until now? Well, a few hours after the accident, we were contacted directly because we had previously collaborated with them. So they contacted us within an hour. They provided us with an answer, saying they had taken note of the name of our investigator, and then they invited us to the crash site as per the protocol. We are also in direct communication with Iran. We are in touch with them on a daily basis, and we are asking what more we can do. For instance, when our investigators arrive in Tehran, they will be allowed not only onto the crash site, but they will also be able to see the remains of the aircraft, which is being reassembled. This already gives us more access than is prescribed by the convention. As well, Iran has invited us to analyze data from the flight recorders. Normally, the expert does not engage in that, but Iran has invited us to do that. Therefore, for us, these are encouraging signs indicating that we will have more access than Iran is legally bound to give us. How far that will go, we don't know yet. We might get those answers in the coming days.
Thank you and good afternoon. I've got a few. If you have a pen or a pencil, just in case you might want to note down, I'll reel off my first questions. I wonder if the Canadian TSB officials or investigators will liaise with counterparts in the United States. I understand the United States Transportation Safety Board officials are also going to be involved here. A Boeing official, I understand, is going to be involved. And if you could maybe explain what specific expertise the Boeing representative might bring to this, and what information you've already received from Ukrainian investigators, and if you could provide some background on our own investigators, their experience, their names, do they serve in the military, what's their background, and were they flying commercial or are they flying on Government of Canada aircraft, military aircraft into Tehran? I have a couple more after those.
All right. So let me start first of all. When Canada participates in a foreign investigation that is led by another country, And I don't want to get too technical here because I know you got lots of questions, but essentially, normally the state of occurrence leads the investigation, and then other countries, depending on their role. So, for example, the state of manufacture of the aircraft, the state of manufacture of the engines, the state of registry and the operator of the aircraft, all have what we call accredited representative status. Those countries, like Canada, like Sweden, like the UK, who had nationals, citizens on that airplane, they have a secondary role, which is just they can visit the accident site and they can get factual information released by the lead investigation agency. So we have already, over the course of the last few days, through Natasha and through her team, been coordinating and talking and with the representatives that have been designated by the other countries who will be part of the investigation. That is a process, that's standard process for us, and we're very familiar. Furthermore, I, as the chair of the TSB, I have counterparts in the U.S., the U.K., et cetera. And so on Thursday, I spoke directly with all of my counterparts in the involved states. I didn't speak directly to the Ukrainians, but Natasha has. But the point is that I've spoken to all of those people in order to try and ensure that we get as much access to the investigation and to reinforce the need to follow the protocols under ICAO Annex 13. So that's very well established. In addition to the invitation from the Iranian AAIB to exercise our rights under ICAO Annex 13, the Ukrainians have also invited us. They are accredited representatives, so they have higher rights, and they are, of course, as the operator and the state of registry of the aircraft. They've invited us to assist them in their investigation, and we've agreed that we will do that. And finally, with respect to our investigators, although normally we would publicly release the name of the lead investigator, the investigator in charge, in this case, we have decided for privacy and security reasons that we will not release the names of our investigators that are en route to Tehran. What I will tell you is that they're very experienced accident investigators, and with respect to those who will eventually deploy to where the recorders are, these are highly recognized and respected specialists in the download and analysis of cockpit voice recorders and flight data recorders.
Thank you very much. Then just a couple other points as well, if you wouldn't mind. But in terms of things left to investigate, I assume a key question that's standing is the Iranians suggest that the plane's direction of flight, it veered off course or something like that, and that may have been a precipitating factor for somebody to cause a missile to launch. Presumably that's something an investigation would establish, the flight of the aircraft at all times, I assume, until it hit the ground, if you just confirm that. Have you been in touch with Dutch officials? The Prime Minister has, the Foreign Minister has. I wonder if you've talked to Dutch officials for tips on investigations in a situation where a state may or may not be so ready to come forward with all the information. And finally, do you have any indication right now of the condition of the black boxes and whether or not data is likely to be able to come off of them? Thank you.
Okay, so first of all, and again, I'm going to talk in general terms. I can't talk specifically. I'm going to reiterate, TSB is not the lead in this investigation. Our role is evolving, and we'll see how far it goes. But I can tell you that when investigators approach an accident scene, everything is on the table. Notwithstanding what people may have said publicly, we don't take that just at face value. We need to corroborate that, validate that information through other means. So there's no doubt that this aircraft was brought down by a surface-to-air missile. That, I don't think anybody doubts. Certainly all the evidence suggests that. The issue about whether it was accidental or intentional, that is something that investigators would normally pursue to understand the sequence of events and the circumstances and the context, especially if it was unintentional, accidental. What were the sequence of events? What was the context that led somebody to make such a tragic mistake? Or take such a tragic action. So that's number one. But all the other peripheral information, this is not going to be a short investigation, regardless of who leads it, regardless of our role. This is going to take time to answer all the questions. So that's number one. Number two, yes, I personally have been in contact with Dutch safety investigators who were directly involved in the MH17 investigation. And I have, because of our international network that we belong to, which involves all of the international independent accident investigation agencies, absolutely, the Dutch have reached out to us as well and offered their assistance, and we believe that the investigation team should absolutely take advantage of their expertise and their experience in this area. And finally, what I can tell you about the black boxes, we prefer to call them cockpit voice and flight data recorders, but I understand what you mean. I can tell you that the recorders are still in Iran. I can tell you that they are damaged, but I can't give you a complete assessment of the extent of the damage because we haven't physically seen them. We've only seen photos. I can tell you that the Iranians the Accident Investigation Bureau are currently looking at some of the challenges associated with downloading and analyzing damaged recorders, and they have reached out to other countries, including Canada, for technical assistance that we could bring to Iran. However, there's a lot of technical challenges with that. So there's some other options being considered for where those recorders might be transported outside of Iran, and to to who and so on. So I'm telling you that generally because this is an example of where if this was happening in Canada, I'd be very specific, but I can't because we are restricted in terms of the level of information that we can share. And this is an example, and this is perfectly normal operations in many ways for us in our role because we're not leading it. But I can assure you that once we know where the recorders are going and where our team is going, we will tell you.
Okay. Okay, next we're going to Emily Bourgeois, Journal de Montreal, followed by Shannon Proudfoot, Maclean's.
Bonjour. Je voulais savoir,
I would like to know, there several days went by, have gone by since the tragedy. How can you be sure that the crash site of the tragedy has not been altered? How can you be sure that any potential changes might get in the way of the investigation? Well, clearly, the accident site is important, and we gather a lot of information from the crash site. We don't have all the details at this point. Our team is not yet on the ground, but they will go to the crash site. They will look at it. We also know that debris has been moved to a hangar which is nearby. We have also received confirmation from Iran's investigating team that we will have access to the hangar. Please understand that in the context of this accident, this happened in a very populated area, and it's very difficult to control this zone, which actually is very, very large. The debris was scattered over a large area, which represents quite a few challenges. So the Iranian team therefore chose to move as much debris as possible into a hangar. You also said that that the black boxes were damaged. How much information do you think could be extracted? I can't answer that question at this point. We haven't seen these flight data recorders. We haven't seen the extent of the damage. However, extracting the information will hold some technical challenges for the Iranian Investigation Bureau. It'll be hard for them to extract and analyze that data. And that's why several countries, including Canada, have offered their assistance in that regard, because everyone has an interest in finding out what the data is inside those recorders.
You said that a safety investigation is the way to go at this point, but that does not preclude other types of investigations in the future. Can you tell us what would be the mechanism for making a different type of investigation go ahead, and what leverage would Canada have to push for that if that was something they wanted?
I think that that's really for others to determine. As I mentioned, in the case of MH17, the Dutch Safety Board did a fulsome safety investigation and determined that, in fact, that aircraft had been downed by a missile, and then looked at all of the other civilian aviation issues. And but at the same time, because of their legal jurisdiction in the Netherlands, the justice side opened a separate parallel investigation. So I don't know. I know that there's a lot of discussions being taken by others in the government with respect to what such an investigation might look like. For us, our mandate is to conduct a safety investigation in accordance with ICAO Annex 13, and that's what we're focused on.
Lastly, you both stressed in French and English that you don't yet know what the exact role of TSB investigators will be here, that that's still to be determined or taking shape. Is that unusual at this point after a crash, however many days we are at here, that would still be becoming clear, or is that a usual timeline for this sort of thing? I mean, I understand the tiers of access and involvement you're saying we get depending on which nation we're talking about, but can you compare this timeline for the clarity of the TSB's role to what would be usual?
So I can say that in most investigations that we've been involved in, foreign investigations, we've played a variety of roles. We have led some investigations that happen in other countries because we've been asked to lead them by that country. We have participated as accredited representatives, so the equivalent of what the U.S., the Ukraine, and France will be in this investigation. And the only other accident I can compare this to is Ethiopian Airlines, where, again, we did not have any status as an accredited representative. We had expert status, but in that case, we did not get any additional rights or any additional access to the investigation at that time. So in this case, already we're seeing a willingness and an openness on the part of the Iranian AAIB to bring us closer in, to give us more access than we would normally have under ICAO. And it remains to be seen how that's going to evolve in the future, given the circumstances, because it really is up to them. What I will say to you is that we are working very hard to build trust daily in order for us to be brought in recognition of our expertise, our independence, and our willingness to act within ICAO, but with an expanded role.
Okay, we're going to go to Joel Denis Bellavance, La Presse, and then Ashley Burke, CBC News.
Oui, bonjour. In
light of the conversations you've had with your Iranian counterparts, and also in light of the comportment of Iranian representatives when they admitted they caused this accident, are you satisfied that you will receive answers on questions related to this tragedy? As it now stands, our relationship with the Iranian Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau is positive. We received quick answers, and they acted quickly under ICAO convention rules. When we chose our expert, they quickly agreed with our choice. They sent us a preliminary report of their investigation. Every time I tried to contact them, they were always very open to our participation, without going farther, though, without giving us a clear role. So our role still remains to be determined with them. Again, two of our investigators are on their way. They will soon be on the ground, and that will help us. They will be on the ground, and tomorrow we will have a meeting with Iran's investigation team, and at that point, I believe that we will have a better idea of our involvement in the investigation. Inaudible question. Are there any precedents which can be compared to our current involvement in this investigation? Are there Were there any situations in the past where the Transportation Safety Board has played a role similar to what it is playing now? Yes, absolutely. In the past, when there have been crashes in other countries, Canada has played a similar role to what is happening now. However, in none of those cases was an aircraft brought down by a missile. We have already collaborated up to a certain point with Iran. 2 years ago, there was a deadly crash in Iran involving a missile, so we already have a working relationship. However, in this investigation, we still don't know what Canada's full role will be or the full role of other countries involved in this investigation. However, I just want to confirm that we are doing everything we can to build trust between all the parties involved in order to get the answers we are looking for. However, we don't know what will happen tomorrow or the day after or next week or how far our involvement will go. So we can just tell you that at this point there are good signs. Will that continue? We don't know. Will everyone get answers to their questions? We don't know, but we're all pulling in the same direction.
Can you reiterate what additional access you've been granted by Iran, and ideally what other access you'd like, and what specific expertise that you have in Canada that you want to bring to this investigation?
All right. So, and again, I'm answering this in the perspective that we are not leading the investigation. We are part of an international team, and the different countries bring different strengths to that experience. So I think, first of all, normally we are limited to visiting the accident site, getting information that has been, factual information that's been released by the state, and getting a copy of the final report. That's what our role entitles to it now. The additional things that we're getting access to is now that the wreckage has been moved to another venue than the site, we're being given the opportunity to view and examine the wreckage. Secondly, we're being asked to provide technical expertise regarding the download and analysis of the recorders, and we're being invited to attend the download and analysis of recorders, which is not something to which we would normally have access. At this point in time, those are the extra steps that we've been allowed to participate in. Now, sorry, if I could just get back to the second part of your question.
Sure, the second part of the question was, what specific expertise does Canada have that you want to bring to the site, and what kind of access? So,
I mean, we have very specific expertise, obviously in the download and the analysis of recorders. We have conducted a number of major investigations, and in fact, when Swissair crashed off the coast of Peggy's Cove in 1998 and was smashed tragically into a million pieces, it was the TSB that recovered and reconstructed that aircraft and did a very extensive analysis of that accident, what caused it, and issued 23 recommendations, which led to numerous changes in the design of flight protection. Where we don't have direct expertise is in the downing of civilian aircraft by military weapons, but there are other countries like the Dutch who we hope will be invited to participate and provide advice to the larger investigation team. But we've done thousands of aircraft investigations. We're recognized as a world leader, and if you look at our investigations, you'll see that not only do we look at the technical factors and the operational, but we also look at the organizational factors, the systemic factors, the context, including our own regulator and regulatory oversight. So we bring a wide variety of expertise to an investigation team, and will complement the expertise that other countries can bring.
The Prime Minister has talked about wanting justice and accountability for the families who lost loved ones in this crash. This safety investigation, how could it play into a separate criminal investigation if there is one? Like, for example, you talked about MH17. Did they tell you if any of that work that those safety investigators did play into the criminal investigation too?
So I can only tell you how it works in Canada, because our legislation in Canada is very clear. Certain information is protected. Recorders, cockpit voice recorders, for example, are protected. Witness statements are protected under our Act. And our reports are not admissible in court because the function of the board is to find out what happened and why, but we can't attribute blame or determine civil or criminal responsibility. So we know that in any accident, and you look at any accident that's happened in Canada, very often there's civil or criminal litigation that goes on after the fact, but that's done separately, and we don't, I mean, we know prosecutors and defenders read our reports, and that may inform the way they're going to go, but that's totally separate from us. So how it's going to work in this case, because there are so many international jurisdictions that are applicable, I can't say. You'd really have to ask that from the Justice Department. But I know the jurisdictions vary around the world. But I know in the case of the Dutch, the Safety Board did the investigation, and then their judicial system, using their laws, pursued criminal investigation against individuals, and that is still underway, by the way. The safety investigation is completed, the reports are out, but the criminal, the judicial process in Holland is still underway as we speak.
Okay, we're going to Helene Bazzetti, Le Devoir next, followed by Alison Lampert, Reuters.
Most of my questions have actually been answered. However, I'd like a clarification. It took a long time before our two first investigators obtained their visas. You said you want to send 2 additional investigators. Do you have a guarantee from Iran that those visas will be delivered quickly? Until now, we have been well supported
par le département d'affaires à l'étranger.
By Global Affairs Canada. Global Affairs Canada has done everything it can to work with Iran to get these visas as quickly as possible. So we'll see. It's possible that our 2 additional investigators will be going to Iran, but it's also possible they'll also be going elsewhere. That remains to be seen. However, the pace of progress was fairly good given the circumstances with regard to getting those visas.
Iran is inviting Canada to play under Annex 13. How much faith, though, do you have in the ability to get the answers you want in an Iran-led investigation, especially given that the country previously lied about the cause of the crash? And can you just give any specifics? I know you were asked about this before, but do you have any specific insight, or independent insight, if I can say, into whether the plane veered off course, as the Iranians claim?
I'm going to answer that question first. We don't have any independent information regarding the flight path of the aircraft, so I'm not going to comment one way or the other. But that is absolutely one of the questions that the investigators and the broad investigation team would certainly look at, because we need the information we need to collect is on the recorders, it's in the wreckage. It's in the air traffic control radar and communications. What was the standard flight plan? What route did the plane follow versus the standard flight plan? All of those questions are on the table. As I mentioned earlier, we're striving to build trust and build a working relationship with the Iranian Accident Investigation Bureau. We already have well-established relationships with the other investigators and the other investigation authorities. And I think when all of us gather in one place, when it comes time to download and analyze the recorders, that is going to be a great opportunity to scope out the roles of various countries and the scope of the investigation. And I'm cautiously optimistic, but it remains to be seen. But I'm optimistic that at least things are moving in that direction. But again, we'll have to see, because clearly some of these questions are going to be very uncomfortable for the country to answer. But we hope that safety will the purpose of safety investigations will override those, and the fact that everybody's acting in accordance with ICAO Annex 13, that will help to lead us in that direction.
Also, Catherine, You referenced the Dutch Safety Board report in the wake of MH17. Some of their recommendations from 2015 did lead to improvements, but others, like the creation of that ICAO conflict zone repository, failed to really materialize. Do you think the world went far enough after MH17 to prevent this type of tragedy from happening?
I guess if you look at the reality of the situation, the answer is no. And I have recently, certainly in the recent days, reviewed the Dutch Safety Board's investigation report. So there were two reports. There was the investigation report on the downing of MH17, and then there was a follow-up report specifically with respect to flying in conflict zones, which the Dutch did in order to determine if their recommendations have been implemented and whether there were any gaps. And I don't normally do this, and I want to make it clear what I'm about to say. Please do not attribute this to me. This is the Dutch Safety Board report, which you can all access. But there was one sentence that stuck out for me, and I think certainly shows that more needs to be done. And this is from the Dutch report, and I quote, "Practice shows that states in which there is ongoing armed conflict will not implement restrictions for their airspace on their own initiative." Now, this is after they've already acknowledged all the actions that have been taken. I've finished my quote. That's after they've acknowledged all the steps that have been taken by ICAO, by states, by airline operators. But they recognized when this report was issued that there were still potential gaps. And unfortunately, we're seeing the results of that. So where that's going to lead in the future, I can't say, but it's clear evidence that more needs to be done when you're dealing with military activities versus civilian operations.
Okay, we're going to go to Christian Noel, Radio Canada, followed by Campbell Clark, Globe and Mail.
Bonjour, Christian Noel ici. C'est pas un accident d'avion ordinaire.
This is not an ordinary airline accident. It involves a missile. To what point will it be a challenge for the TSB to investigate this? Second, this involves a military force. Will you have access to military personnel? Will you get answers for them? And second, will the geopolitical context be part of your investigation? Well, clearly the geopolitical context plays a role in what will be a very complex security investigation. As to whether we'll have access to that information, I can't answer that question. That said, I'd like to clarify something. The international investigation led by Iran with the participation of Canada and other countries should definitely continue. How far will it go? That remains to be seen. You will be able to visit the crash site. You will look at the wreckage without necessarily being able to conduct the investigation. So how much leeway will you have to find the answers Canadians are looking for? What guarantee will you have that you will be able to answer those questions if you don't have the leeway you would normally need? Well, other countries are involved on top of Iran, Ukraine, the United States, and France, amongst others. These countries have standing, and they, in fact, have higher standing in the investigation than Canada. Natasha can speak more to that. We were asked by Ukraine to support them in this investigation. Ukraine has the right to make this request. We have the right to advise Ukraine. Again, we don't have the same status as that country, but we'll do our best. I have the impression that Canada will play a more passive role. Well, I'm not willing to agree with that. Clearly, there are a lot of discussions going on in the background, but we need to build trust.
That the role of Canadian investigators will be limited to certain things, and they seem to be mostly of the what happened variety, technical aspects, flight recorders. The larger questions that you spoke of earlier about why this happened, the sequence of events in the military, why the airspace was not closed, and so on. These involve dealing with military sources, records, government sources and records. You don't necessarily, even with your wider role, have access to that. Are the Iranians, as the state of occurrence and the lead investigator, the only people who will be asking questions of their military, asking questions of their government, or do those other international investigators, the Americans, the Ukrainians, the French, will they have a role in that?
Well, I think that remains to be determined. Maybe, Natasha, you could just go through a few of the rights of accredited representatives, which are definitely superior to what the role of an expert plays.
So basically, to become an accredited representative, you have to be either the state of registry, the state of operator, state of design, or state of manufacture, or have been invited by the country who's leading the investigation to act as an accredited representative. AC reps, as we call them, they have actually they can participate, they are entitled to participate in all aspects of an investigation under the control of the investigator in charge, right? So the difference with the expert is quite a bit, actually. So an expert, on the other hand, would be allowed to visit the scene of the accident, would be allowed to access relevant and factual information that has been publicly released by the state conducting the investigation, and get a copy of the final report. So that's basically the range. So you have AC reps on one side that are allowed to participate fully into the investigation, whereas on the other side you have the expert who is quite limited. However, we have, like we said earlier, we have been in contact with the Iran Investigation Bureau, and we are seeing some positive outcome out of that. So they have invited us to the download of the recorders. This is above and beyond what Annex 13 allows us to do. They have also allowed us to not only visit the site, but go to the wreckage and examine the wreckage, which is also above and beyond what the Annex 13 allows us to do. So we're confident, cautiously confident, but confident that we will continue. We know we will continue to work really hard to get more accesses, and we're confident that it might be.
I'm not asking about the TSB's role in this investigation, but about the international participation, because I think most of us would consider that the only form of oversight for the Iranian investigators. And so what I want to know is, will those investigators be involved in talking to Iranian military officials? When you say full participation, are they allowed in that? Because usually foreign militaries don't invite people in.
Yeah, so it's, and I'll give you the parallel in Canada. In Canada, when other countries participate in a Canadian investigation because of foreign aircraft registry, foreign aircraft design, etc., we in Canada do not allow them to participate in the interviews because our legislation prohibits and protects those interviews. I don't know what the appropriate legislation, statute, protocols are in Iran. So no, we can't answer whether they would permit other countries to participate in the interviews, but I tell you, we don't. So I guess the question will be, you know, how far are they going to allow, as the lead agency, how far are they going to allow ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization, may be able to help play a role here? We'll see. But if we don't get those kind of answers, then others will have to look at other mechanisms to get there.
So the international team will rely on the information provided to them by the Iranian lead investigator?
Unless the Iranians allow people to participate directly in the interviews. But again, as I said, that's up to them to decide, and it's contingent on what their protocols and procedures are in Iran.
Okay, we're just going to take a quick break from the room to see if there's anyone on the line. Jacob, is there...
Yes, thank you. Please press *1 on your telephone keypad at this time if you have a question. N'hésitez pas à appuyer sur étoile 1 pour toute question. Once again, please press *1 on your telephone keypad if you have a question. Puis appuyez sur étoile 1 si vous avez une question. Our first question comes from Stephen Chase from the Global Mail. Please go ahead, your line is open. La première question vient de Stephen Chase du Global Mail.
Yes, good afternoon. I just wanted to see if you could help us summarize Canada's current role. It sounds like it's basically observer status. I've listened to the entire press conference. I've heard the caveats about being allowed to examine the wreckage and being allowed to be present during the download of data, but is it basically observer status right now?
We don't use the term observer in that context. Our role is expert plus. Expert plus the ability to examine the wreckage, expert plus the ability to participate in the download and analysis of the recordings. Other countries who will be more actively involved in the investigation, who will be allowed to be more actively involved in the investigation, have indicated to us that they will ask for our assistance as advisors in their participation. Beyond that, we can't say. It will depend on what happens in the coming days. We are, and I'm sure you're well aware that many levels of our government are pushing for us to play a more active role. But how that will roll out, we can't say at this point. But we're certainly advocating, and we're trying to maintain a positive working relationship with the AIB in Iran so that they have confidence in us that they can rely on us, one, in terms of bringing expertise to the, but also in terms of not sharing information publicly at this point that we're not entitled to release.
Okay.
Thank you. There are no further questions registered at this time.
Okay, thank you. We're going to go to Michelle Lamarche, TVA next, and then Jolson Lim, iPolitics.
Thank you very much. You answered almost all of my question, two brief ones. How optimistic and confident are you that at the end of this exercise, Canadians will know whether the missile was launched intentionally or not? Well, it's very difficult to answer that question. I'm cautiously optimistic, but I'm also realistic. So as time goes by and we work with the Iranian Investigation Bureau, we will have a better idea of how far they are willing to pursue the investigation and what they will give us access to. Now, with regard to airspace in a conflict zone, at the end of this exercise, do you believe that those rules will have to be tightened? Do you think that in a conflict zone we will have to tighten the rules? Since all of the recommendations of the MH17 crash report have not been implemented, it's clear that there's still work to be done to minimize, to mitigate the possibility of this type of accident happening again.
How much time will TSB investigators have to see the accident site as well as the wreckage? I'm just trying to get a sense of the quality of access that you'll have to the physical evidence there.
So far, okay, so far we have, the plans are that we're going to meet up with the Accident Investigation Bureau of Iran in tomorrow, their time, and we have at least a couple of days. But you know, again, our investigators are going to have to go with whatever they're allowed to do while they're on site, and then after that, we'll have to see what happens. So we're kind of going day by day right now. In terms of how long they're going to be there, what they're going to be able to do, and when they're going to come out of there. There are limitations, as you can appreciate, on their visas, but what we understand that they can be extended if required. But for now, we're just sort of looking at a 48-hour window, and then we'll build on that. What I can tell you is that, you know, we're going to stay here and answer your questions as the best we can for as long as we can. But after this, we really don't have any new information to add, and when we do have more information that we can add, we will continue to issue statements, as we've been doing for the last few days, and update you on sort of what's happening. But again, I caution you, and not just the media, but also the families, that we can only share with you a certain amount of information. We have more information than we can share. So we want to respect the boundaries laid out for us in ICAO Annex 13. But we will update you as we can.
Okay, we're going to Jordan Press, CP, and then Ken Pohl, Canadian Skies.
Good afternoon. Thanks so much for all your time. There's one thing I want to pick up on. You talked about building trust with the Iranians. Can you just describe the challenges in doing that and exactly what you have done to try to build that trust?
As I said, we have normal, long-standing relationships with other accident investigation agencies that we've built up over years and years and years. We have our own association of independent accident investigation safety boards with 17 countries that are represented. And we meet at least once a year, but in between we have regular communications. We don't have the same level of interaction with Iran, only because we'd only have interaction with them if a Canadian aircraft or a Canadian product was involved, a Canadian operator was involved, or in this case, there were Canadian casualties. So we haven't had the opportunity to build as close a working relationship over the years, although we did do an investigation. We've also been to some extent limited, given the current environment and the restrictions on the embargo and trade and so on. So we are building it, and we're building it by being consistent with ICAO Annex, by regular communications, both written and verbal. And by being very careful in what kind of information we release at this time. So that's how we're building trust. And as I said, I think once all of the countries involved, including Iran, the Accident Investigation Bureau, and please understand when I say Iran, I'm always talking about the Accident Investigation Bureau. I think we'll have a better idea then in the coming days to determine how much farther our working relationship is going to go, what's going to be the scope of the investigation, but we will still be limited in terms of what we can say publicly. It'll be up to the Iranians to determine that.
So then as my follow-up, you said off the bat that you wanted a full investigation, transparent. And if you didn't feel that that was what the public and the families were getting, that you'd be willing to speak up,
yes.
What does that look like, speaking up?
It could look like a variety of ways. And it may not come from us, by the way. It may come from other countries that are more active in the investigation than we are. It could be that the lines of inquiry that we would normally pursue are not being pursued. It could be that the information which is coming out, that we have credible facts to indicate that it's not complete or it's misleading. But I really hope that's not where. I mean, everything that we've been seeing so far is giving us some optimism that this is heading and can be managed in the context of a foreign accident investigation under ICAO's protocols.
A couple of questions. I'll give you a yes or no one first. Have you received any communication from the Ukrainians about their initial conclusions as to the cause of the crash?
Not directly.
Not directly. The flight data recorder, cockpit voice recorder, we know the build year of the airplane. Do you know the generation of those recorders?
I don't have those specific details with me at this point.
Okay, and how long are the initial visas for?
It's my understanding, and this is general, I mean, that question really should probably go to Global Affairs, but my understanding is that generally it's about 14 days in country over a 30-day period, but that they can be extended on site. But that's for everybody. That's not just for us.
Ashley, do you have a follow? Yeah. Okay, Ashley Burke, CBC. And we're wrapping up soon. Unless anyone has follows, just please signal, and then we'll
emotionally, how do you feel that 57 Canadians lost their lives and Canada is playing a much smaller role in this investigation?
I can say that we're horrified, shocked, and saddened, and that we know we have expertise that we can bring to this investigation along with our international partners that can help get the answers that the families deserve and that the public wants as well.
You said when you spoke at the beginning that if Iran isn't being forthcoming with information, that you would push them on that. What exactly can you do? What power do you have?
It's not a question of power. It's through international investigations. I'll say a couple of things here. First of all, the team, the investigative team, which is composed of multiple nationalities, they work as a team. Very often, the international boundaries disappear. You got a bunch of people who are professional, who are dedicated, who are experts, and who want to find out what happened, and they work together collaboratively. But it obviously also depends on the lead investigation agency in terms of their abilities and also their willingness. But I can tell you that under ICAO Annex 13, focused safety investigations, the experience that we've had to date, and with this one remains to be seen, is everybody wants to work together. Everybody wants to get the answers, even though we don't infer blame and others may infer blame.
Okay, we'll go to Glenn next.
Just to follow on that point, if the final report is at odds with the observations of the Canadians or any other countries involved, is there any mechanism to present a dissenting opinion or to object to the ultimate conclusion of the report?
There may be, but I don't know specifically what it would be, so that's something we'd have to follow up on.
Okay, and just behind there, Joel Denis.
Vous avez mentionné que l'enquête risque d'être longue.
You said that the investigation might be long.
Une idée en tête?
Do you have any idea how long it might take?
No, c'est sûr que ça dépend des ressources.
Clearly that depends of resources invested in the investigation and the scope of the investigation, as well as other factors. I don't exactly remember how long the Dutch took to produce their report. I think it took them 1 or 2 years. And the Swissair investigation, well, that took Canada almost 5 years. When it comes to ICAO, normally a report is supposed to be produced within 1 year, but again, that depends on the complexity of the investigation, and we cannot shorten an investigation only to meet a deadline when there might still be information to be gathered.
The other question, and then if you have si vous avez une question de suivi, again, I think we have to be clear. What I'm trying to tell you is that if we are involved in the investigation, and we're not going to endorse a report if we believe that there are serious problems with the report because it's either incomplete or inaccurate or misleading. And I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm just saying it doesn't matter who's leading the investigation. When we get involved, we do as much as we can in partnership with the others to make sure it's complete, it's thorough, it's accurate, and it answers the questions. Okay? But that's how we want to work.
Okay, unless you have anything else to add, I think we'll end it there.
That's fine. I guess the two key messages are Canada's role is evolving. It remains to be seen how far we're going to be able to go. And please understand, and we're asking the families to understand that we can only release information under certain constraints, and we need to respect that in order to maintain the confidence of our partners in this international effort. Thank you.
Okay.